Hey guys, it's Mr. V over here doing a book review today for Starter Villain by John Scalzi. Now, before I get into my book review, I want you to know that I try to do a spoiler-free book review, which is a little tougher with this book today, but I'll try my best to not give any spoilers away. And I'll just say a few brief things about the book. Now, this book, the main premise for this, so I'll read some of the back, is basically you follow Charlie. He's a guy you follow, a little down and out in his life at that point, and all of a sudden, Charlie's long-lost uncle passes away and leaves his supervillain business to Charlie. But being a supervillain is not easy as Charlie thinks. So you can see that's the main premise for the book. It's a little crazy as you can tell, but it's a great fantasy book. Now, I enjoyed this book. It was definitely a lot of fun because from the beginning, you're just following Charlie's life. That's all you're doing, but the story is very easy to get into. From the beginning, some odd things start to happen. You already heard about the main premise, but his billionaire uncle passes away, and his billionaire uncle, who he really almost does not know, obviously doesn't know he was a supervillain, as the book description says. Charlie doesn't know any of that stuff, but his billionaire uncle had some requests after he passed away. And then Charlie starts to learn a little bit more. That's about as far as I can say. But it's just, mysterious things happen throughout this whole book. And you're always wondering what will happen next. Because even after Charlie learns certain things about his uncle, there's always something new that comes up and then something crazier. And it's just, you're always wondering what will happen because it happens throughout the whole book. But many fun situations are happening and they're all coming up because it's basically like there's many comedic elements to it. And it's just, there's a lot of comedy thrown in and a lot of crazy situations happen. I've seen this book listed as a sci-fi or a fantasy. I definitely label this as a fantasy because there's so many crazy situations that come up. I'll give you a quick example. It's not a spoiler, but at one point, Charlie meets some talking dolphins. But these talking dolphins are very crude and they just swear a lot and they're just not happy with life. But these talking dolphins want to even form a labor union, and Charlie needs to deal with them. So you can see how crazy it can become. And this is supposed to take place in just the regular world. And this is just happening separately. So you can see how crazy the situation can be. And that's why I say it's a fantasy one. But it is still great because the story flows very well. As you just wanted to keep reading it. I just wanted to keep reading the book. As the more I read, the more I got into it. And it was just consistently fun from like beginning to the end. And there were no boring spots, and that was great. Now, it's a fairly short book, as you can see. It's not too long. It's a book that you can finish in about 8 hours. So it's not too long a book, but there were no boring spots, and that's always a great thing that you always wanted to keep reading. You wanted to keep finding out what happened, and I already told you there's a lot of mystery in it. So that's why it was a lot of fun in those terms. Yet it's still a very just simple book, but the biggest thing is it kept me entertained, and that's always a fun thing you want. It just kept me entertained. So while there are a lot of great things for the book, there are still some things I did not like about the book. So one of the things I didn't like about the book was that the author did not describe the character's looks, or he very rarely described the character's looks. I always want the author to describe what another character looks like to an extent, even just hair color, something. But the author almost never described characters' looks, so you almost have to like visualize it on your own. Like you don't fully know what the author is trying to like do. And even some of the scenery, he didn't always do too well at describing it. He described some, but others he doesn't really describe much. So again, it can be a little tough, especially when Charlie is going through this crazy type of situation. You want to visualize a little more. Another thing I didn't like, though, and this was the biggest thing I didn't like, was I felt that the dialogue was just marginal. The way he wrote it was just marginal dialogue, and that is a big thing when a good part of the story is dialogue. I don't know the percentage of the story, but a good part is dialogue. So being just marginal dialogue wasn't too good. But overall, I still found the dialogue being good enough, and it was just a fairly silly story. It was a lot of fun, but it's not a story for everyone. If you want to read this kind of story that has this like villain, but like comedy and this comedic villain type of thing, then I think this would be a fun story for you because it is very entertaining if you want that comedic villain type of thing. And it's a very short book, so you can get through it pretty fast. And I read it in just a few days. And just a quick side note, I can actually see this being made into a movie, just a simple movie. because it, again, has that comedic villain thing, and there's been some of those comedic villains we've seen in the past. So let me give it my official rating right now. So I always rate my books on a scale of 0 to 10, with a 0 being an awful book, a 5 being an average, and a 10 is phenomenal. If you guys anywhere near a 10, you put that on your reading list, because I'm a very tough critic. We start to move up even 1 point in my rating system, and a 5 is average. So this book, Starter Villain. This was a very tough one for me to rate, because I was going between 2 ratings, but in the end, I'm going to rate this book a 6.5. I almost gave it a 6, but I decided to move it up to a 6.5 because it didn't really have many boring elements. It was very entertaining, very easy to get into, and I just felt that it's a fun book if you want to read that type of book. So, I thought it was very fun. Now, if you guys have any questions or comments, please post it in the comment section below, as I always love hearing your comments about the book or your questions. And if you enjoyed the book review today, hit the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But either way, thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.